If you're a graphic designer or have even like a hint of taste, I apologize for everything you're about to see. I am totally back-end guy, no front-end abilities whatsoever, but I did get my friend to draw some sweet graphics of basically tons of babies in peril. This comes because I have, years ago I worked in tech support. I had a good friend that some on-high engineering manager did something awful, and he said, and my friend said, I want to pour hot coffee on his babies. And I loved the idea of, because you don't want to harm them, you want to like harm their children in front of them, and that idea just really, it resonated with me. So you're going to see a whole bunch of babies in peril, and I don't actually wish anybody's babies harm, but it helps me get through the rage of being a software developer. Also, I'm not good at public speaking, so if a slide comes up and I seem surprised, that's why, and I'll figure it out, but that's okay. So anyway, my name is Jason Legler. I work for Amazon AWS. I've been in software for 17 years, writing lots of different languages. My emphasis the last probably 5 years has been in distributed computing, so lots of Scala and Elixir and Erlang. At Amazon, I'm actually writing more Go and JS, which is weird. The reason I'm telling you these 3 things, by the way, is because you're supposed to always try to figure out these 3 things to figure out if you're being bullshitted or not. And so, you know who I am and why I think I can be telling you this, and then basically what I'm trying to tell you is nothing other than this is purely for my own. I don't want to maintain crap, and so I figure the more I tell people how I want things to work, maybe some of them will do it and I'll have to maintain less crap. So this is purely totally selfish. Okay, why? So this is basically the most pedantic topic you could go to a talk about, naming things. But it turns out, at least for me, it's really, really important. You need to write code. Specifically, I write code for myself in 6 months because my future self is way better than past self. And I leave pretty detailed notes to past self because I know past self is an idiot. You want to basically write code for other people. I've had chats, and I don't know if anybody in here has been part of the chats on the Denver Dev Slack channel, but there are people that think code is for machines, and if that's your fundamental belief, we are so far apart that this talk is really not for you. Basically, we're writing software for each other, where the code is to communicate with each other, what we're trying to make the machines do. So the rules. I would actually love to have some rules, but there are no rules, because every single one of them gets broken, basically, immediately. Naming things is really, really hard. What I usually do is you will have a set of rules for your teams, your libraries, and your languages, and I follow them in that order. So rather than trying to cover all of the rules that don't actually exist, I'm basically just going to have some guidelines. First of all, I'm totally aware this slide sucks. I doubt if anyone can read it, but essentially the contents of it are you want to make your names as short as you can and no shorter. So you're always shooting for a short variable that does actually tell you something. I have some things on this list here basically that are kind of pet peeves of mine. saving yourself some typing, not awesome usually because your IDE or text editor will do it. Short names can make understanding code easier in some contexts, but in others it can be really, really confusing. Single letter names completely suck for search, but work well in mathy problem domains and short-lived variables with really obvious introduction scope. And then acronyms and abbreviations drive me nuts, mainly because nobody standardizes on them. So again, really hard to search for. And then there are giant speed bumps for new developers. So when you're bringing people on your team, if you're in a really acronym-heavy domain and you're using tons of abbreviations, they're going to spend a month. I literally, at one place I worked, had a book of acronyms because who knows? It's just really tricky. And then the other side of that is long names convey more meaning, but they also can provide a ton of visual clutter, which you also want to avoid. So, anyway, for all the rest of the slides, I'm going to basically have some examples. Put generally in front of all of them, because I can think of corner cases where these don't apply to every single one. So the first one, make your functions verbs and most other things nouns. This seems fairly obvious. I don't know, can you guys see the examples? Can you read them? Basically, there's only one function in this, right, which is release the chickens. Everything else is nouns. I don't have a boolean in this one, which I should, but I'll get to that one. The reason I do this is because it makes your code generally read kind of like you can read it. It's like an actual sentence. Your verbs do things, your nouns, are the things the verbs act on. Second one, don't reference your type in your variable name. This maybe it's hard to see, but when you call your list of things list, it makes it it's very frustrating. What do I call, like if this wasn't here, if this had just been passed into this, I have no prayer. I have to go look somewhere else in the code to find out what that is. Give it a decent name, like maybe names. And then you can operate on it. You can say basically this is an Elixir example, but you can say for name and name, but names rules. Pretty straightforward, but tons of people don't do this. I've encountered list as a variable name and string so many times, and it's infuriating. Use modal verbs for booleans. Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs in the English language that express possibility. So they align really, really well with booleans. So instead of having a variable called fly for your ostrich, which is false, have can fly. Make it kind of an action. It makes reading booleans a lot easier, and it also makes them really obvious. And the reason that matters is because booleans are kind of a peculiar data type in that they behave a little differently in like if statements than other values do. So that's why I treat them a little differently. Variable names should have something to do with what you're doing. So this example, if you find yourself thinking things like, this is weird, Sophia's already said, why isn't Camilla iterating? I guess I need to set the Miguel flag. You should totally refactor that. That is a nightmare. You're never going to keep track of that. I actually got that one off of Reddit. My example is usually when I'm like 6 hours into troubleshooting hell, I devolve into using just profanity. So, and I couldn't really use that as a slide, so I basically just swapped a bunch of names, but yeah, with me it's just, and the more tired and irritated I am, the more horrible the profanity gets. And it's never made it into production, but you basically just want to, yeah, so refactor it, regardless of how you get there. Variable names should be something that can pluralize. So the word data, literally everything in your computer is data. So don't call it that. That's the worst thing. And it also happens to not pluralize. So you can't say like for data and data. Like it just doesn't work. You can have formal grammar and say for data and datas, but then you're just kind of a dick. Like just avoid data. That one, like that variable is one of the things. I come in at 8 in the morning and I get my coffee and I sit down like we're curing cancer today. This is gonna be so awesome. And then by 2 in the afternoon, like more of my hair has gone gray and fallen out. And I'm like cursing the gods because I've been in some hell where I've had to figure out through 75 different files and 13 levels of inheritance what data is. Just don't do it. Just don't use it as a name. It's terrible. You'll notice my example, I had foot, basket, base, and exercise, which mean nothing, except they're all balls, which is awesome. That's what you want to do. You want to give your variable names like something that actually means something. The only thing I hate this slightly less than I hate data, is data 1 and data 2, which is another awesome thing that people do, and I don't know why. Like if you have a function and it's returning things, call that data whatever the things it's returning is. And if you're writing something so generic that you can't think of anything, just don't call it data. Call it something you can call, you can pluralize at least. This one's awesome. Don't lie. I actually saw this. This was in Python being treated as a Boolean. So it was lying on like meta levels. It was lying because 0 does not equal 1, and it was also lying because integers shouldn't be used as Booleans when you have perfectly usable Booleans. And I'll get to something in a little bit here. This was a global. So you would see 0 just pop up in a weird place. What is 0? Well, it was an integer being, right, it's true. Variable descriptiveness is directly related to your type system. So the more descriptive your type system, the less descriptive your names need to be, except for primitives, because string could be anything, or int could be anything. So this example, I got this out in Marfa, Texas. If I was storing a string, I would call it JSON-SICK because I want it to be very descriptive. If I actually had a class of all my sick hats, and this was just an instance of it, call it H. You could even call it hat. You could even call it H. Like, I don't mind single letter variable names if your type system is good enough that you can mouse over it or whatever text editor you use and see like, oh, that's the thing. That's the thing I want. Variable names can be very short if their introduction and purpose are obvious. I say this because if the introduction is 3 layers of inheritance deep, it better have a great name. Same with globals, but if it's brought into context in a one-liner, like this is basically an elixir how you iterate over cars, and for each car, print it. This is a Go example using houses. As long as you're doing that, I don't mind single letter variable names. They're obvious. It's exactly what it is. In fact, giving that a longer name, you could say for house and houses, but you don't need to. And if you use a long enough name in that, you could actually make it more confusing. This is how Haskell people can get away with code that looks like a cat walked across a keyboard, because their type system is so good that you can figure it out pretty easily. Okay, don't use global variables. But nobody listens to me on that. I've somehow managed to go 17 years in this career and never never conjured a global variable up. But I've worked at many places that have them. If you're gonna have them, which everybody does, I guess, give them an awesome name and something beat you in the head obviousness. Like this one here has this global pool that I created. It's a thread pool, which is actually a terrible example because Python doesn't really have global thread pools. Like you wouldn't use a thread pool per se because it's got a global interpreter lock. But in any case, you may as well call it global thread pool for non-docking calls. Give it something really long, which also discourages people from using lots of globals, because to get that thing into a line of code and have it not just hurt your eyes is really, really challenging. And I want people to have that challenge with globals. I want those to hurt a little bit. Don't use abbreviations and acronyms unless they're standard in your problem domain and standardized across your code base. This kind of crap, particularly in Go, you'll see CTX, which is WTF, no idea, and then CTXT, get CTXT. So they changed it in the same line. It's not even the same. Completely unsearchable, and I have no idea what that is if I'm unfamiliar with the code. The example below, it's like, okay, so you've got an MRSS context. Well, you have to know what that is. Oh, it's even spelled wrong. I'm a dick. Sorry, that's my mistake. MRSS context, at least then you know you're getting some type of media RSS, the context of that. Who knows what that is, but you have a prayer of figuring it out as opposed to a CTX, which, who knows, could be anything. Be creative when writing examples. Now, some people are really abstract thinkers, and I'm not good at that. And so some people, like foobar, is a totally awesome example. For me, thanks for nothing. That does nothing for me. I see that and my eyes just glaze over. I'm like, okay, I need an example that's like something. It's an opportunity to be creative. So call it your baby is scalded by coffee. You'll notice the verb type, Boolean. Then you know, like, oh, you can create, it's a baby, and you can scald it with coffee. That's what you want. I can get something out of that example. But don't get cute in production. So these are some things I've actually seen. Have you guys, does anybody watch TV? So there's a commercial in 2014, there was a commercial, and it still plays sometimes for Discovery, or Discover cards, that had a guy saying frog protection and fraud protection. Somebody called it frog protection in our source code. So when you went looking for the fraud code and you're like desperately searching, no, it was frog. I should have known that. Like that stuff, murderous rage. That makes me so angry. I can't even describe it. Or this one down here, less harmful but just as irritating. The incrementer was called chocula, as in count chocula. Funny, but I really want to cuss right now. Don't do that. That's awful. That's the worst thing. If you're writing really generic code, a lot of these rules don't necessarily apply because it's hard. If you're writing super generic code, you're not going to be able to name it something beyond. It'll be something weird. Just don't use data. Anything data. This dude, Peter Hilton, has a checklist though that essentially, if you work through this checklist, you will end up with a name for it. My favorite is number 4 because people like writing generic code, and you basically want to hold off on writing your generic code until you start seeing patterns, because whether you think it or not, you suck at seeing into the future. Everyone does. And what happens is you'll end up writing these really, really generic things that never get used in a generic way, and all they do is make working on that code hard. So just make an effort. If you really do know it needs to be generic, by all means, rock it out. But unless you're sure, write the one usage first and just plan to torch it. It's easier. And then finally, ways to enhance your life. These are not necessarily related to variable naming, but if you combine your variable naming, even these little basic schemes, with a max column width rule, I know people hate that. It doesn't have to be 80, doesn't have to be 100, doesn't have to be 120, all those, they're totally legit. You will be amazed at how much your readability of your code improves because you can't do one line of crap with single letters that is, 180 characters wide. As I said before, hold off on writing your generic code until patterns emerge. And then write code so that it can be torn out and rewritten easily as requirements change, and lean towards composition instead of inheritance. I'm basically just selling this right now because I'm tired of dealing with this crap, and I can't cover it in a talk. I would have to have a huge talk of all the things I hate. It would be really long. And then also tell your family members that you love them if you can, because you won't always be able to. Thanks.